It took one night shift pharmacy intern to catch what 3 attending physicians and a senior cardiologist had all signed off on: the 7th floor of St. Brendan's Medical Center in Ottawa didn't belong to anyone in particular. Not to the board, not to the department heads, and certainly not to the man whose private security detail had occupied the family lounge since Tuesday. But for Willa Okafor-Reid, 26 years old and 14 months into her pharmacy residency, the 7th floor belonged to the patients. It always had. That was the part of the job nobody warned you about in school. She had found the discrepancy at 2:47 in the morning, not because she was looking for it. She had been running a routine reconciliation on a post-op chart, one of those tasks that gets handed to residents because it's considered too tedious for anyone senior, when she noticed the dosage flag on room 714. The patient was an adult male, 61 kilograms, recovering from a corrective cardiac procedure. The anticoagulant ordered was within the standard range, but the secondary medication, a specific enzyme inhibitor meant to reduce the risk of rejection response, had been logged at a concentration that didn't match the patient's renal panel from that morning. Not dramatically, not obviously, just enough that if you weren't paying careful attention, and if you hadn't spent the previous 2 years memorizing interaction thresholds the way some people memorize song lyrics, you would have moved on. Willa did not move on. She pulled the chart again. Then the morning labs, then the dispensing record from the previous 2 shifts. The same dosage had been administered 4 times. She sat very still at the pharmacy station with the file open in front of her, the hum of the ventilation system filling the empty corridor, and thought about what she was looking at. Then she thought about who was in room 714. His name was Caius Renner. She had not known who he was when she first flagged the chart. She had simply seen a patient number and a diagnostic code and a weight-adjusted dosing table. But the nurses had talked. The security men in the family lounge had made it impossible not to notice. Caius Renner was, by several credible accounts, the most influential private sector figure in the Ottawa Valley. He had built a logistics empire across Ontario and Quebec over the course of 30 years, the kind of empire that didn't make the front page because it didn't need to. He moved quietly. He owned things. He had arrived at St. Brendan's following what had been logged publicly as a routine cardiac event, and privately, according to the whispers at the nursing station, as something considerably more complicated. None of that changed what Willa saw in the chart. She printed the reconciliation report, tucked it under her arm, and went to find the attending physician on record. Dr. Prentice was not pleased to be found. He was in the residence lounge on the 6th floor, a cup of coffee going cold on the table beside him, reviewing something on his tablet with the posture of a man who had made it very clear through decades of body language that he was not to be interrupted between midnight and 4. He looked up when Willa appeared in the doorway, and the expression on his face moved through several stages before settling on something that was not quite contempt, but was close enough to be uncomfortable. "Residency program," he said before she could speak. "Pharmacy. I'm Willa Okafor-Reid. I was running the overnight reconciliations in on the 7th floor, and you're here because the enzyme inhibitor on room 714 has been dispensed at a concentration inconsistent with the patient's current renal function." She set the printed report on the table in front of him. 4 administrations. The last one was at 11 tonight. Dr. Prentice looked at the paper. He did not pick it up. "That dosage was reviewed by Dr. Albrecht and countersigned by 2 attending nurses," he said. "It's within the acceptable window. It's within the acceptable window for a patient with normal renal clearance. Miss Renner's creatinine this morning was elevated. If you look at the morning panel—" "I've seen the morning panel. Then you saw the creatinine." A beat of silence. The ventilation hummed. "The variation is minor," Dr. Prentice said. "It doesn't warrant a dosage adjustment at this stage." Willa looked at him. She had learned, over 14 months, how to read the difference between a doctor who had considered something and a doctor who was declining to consider it. The distinction mattered more than most people realized. "With respect," she said, A continued administration at this concentration over the next 48 hours creates a meaningful accumulation risk. I'd like to flag it for review. You've flagged it, Dr. Prentice said. I've reviewed it, thank you. He turned back to his tablet. Willa picked up her printed report and walked out of the lounge. She stood in the stairwell for a moment, between the 6th and 7th floors, with the report in her hands and the particular feeling she had learned to recognize over the past year. The one that meant she was right, and someone with more authority was telling her she wasn't, and she had to decide what to do about that. She had been in this position before. Not this exact position, not with this specific patient, but the essential geometry of it was familiar. She was 26. She had a residency badge and a printed chart, and no power whatsoever in the formal hierarchy of the building. She could escalate. She could go to the department head, or to the patient safety officer, or she could document her concern in the pharmacy system and let it sit there as a record that she had tried. Or she could go to room 714 directly. She knew which option the system preferred. She also knew what 4 more administrations of that dosage would do to Caius Renner's kidneys over the next 2 days. She went to room 714. The man in the bed was not what she had expected, though she would have been hard-pressed to explain what she had expected. He was in his early 60s, broad-shouldered in a way that his hospital gown couldn't entirely disguise, with silver-grey hair and a face that had clearly been composed for most of its life into an expression of calm authority. Right now, that face was tired and a little grey around the edges, and the monitors beside him were beeping in the low, steady rhythm of a person who was technically wishable and practically miserable. There were 2 men in the room. One was seated near the window, large, still, with the posture of someone employed specifically to stand between a person and problems. The other stood near the door. Neither spoke when Willa entered, but both watched her with the focused attention of people who assessed everyone who crossed a threshold. Caius Renner opened his eyes. "You're not one of the regular nurses," he said. His voice was lower than she'd expected and clearer, alert. "No," Willa said. "My name is Willa Okafor-Reid. I'm the overnight pharmacy resident. I'm sorry for the hour, don't be." He looked at the folder under her arm. "That's not a chart. It's a reconciliation report. I ran it tonight on all 7th floor patients. I found something in your medication profile that I'd like to talk to you about." The man near the window shifted slightly. Caius Renner held up one hand, a small gesture, unhurried, and the man stilled. "Sit down," Renner said to Willa. She sat. She explained it the way she had learned to explain things to patients, not talking down to them, not burying them in clinical language, but being honest about what the numbers meant and what the risk looked like if nothing changed. She showed him the creatinine level. She showed him the dosage log. She explained what accumulation meant in practical terms. He listened without interrupting. His eyes moved between her face and the papers with the focus of someone who had spent a career reading situations quickly and accurately. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Dr. Prentice has signed off on this dosage," he said. "Yes, and you disagree with his assessment. I think the morning labs weren't weighted appropriately in the dosage calculation." "Yes." Another silence. One of the monitors beeped once and settled. "Why are you here?" he said, not accusingly, more like he was genuinely trying to understand the answer. "You've documented your concern. You spoke to the attending. You've done what the process requires. Why are you in this room at 3 in the morning?" Willa thought about that for a second. "Because the process doesn't always catch everything," she said. "And because it's your kidneys." Something shifted in Renner's expression. Not warmth, exactly. More like recognition, the particular kind that one person extends to another when they realize they're operating on the same set of principles. "What do you need from me?" he said. "I'd like your permission to request an independent pharmacological review. Your care team can decline it, but if you ask for it as the patient, they have to document why they're declining." He looked at her for a long moment. "And if I ask for it," he said, "your name goes on the request." "Yes, that's not a small thing to put your name on," he said. Not when you're 14 months into a residency. Willa blinked. She hadn't mentioned how long she'd been in the program. She looked at him, and he gave her a very faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I know what a residency badge looks like," he said, "and I know which year of a program puts someone on the overnight reconciliation shift." She wasn't sure what to say to that, so she said the honest thing. "I know it's not a small thing," she said, "but I'd rather put my name on it than not." Renner nodded once. Then he looked at the man near the window and said in the same unhurried tone he used for everything, "Get me the patient advocate's number." The review was filed at 4:15 in the morning. By 7 a.m., the independent pharmacological consultant, a Dr. Achterberg, called in from the University of Ottawa Hospital Network, had reviewed the full chart and the lab panels and confirmed Willa's concern. The enzyme inhibitor dosage was adjusted. Dr. Albrecht was notified. Dr. Prentice was notified. A formal documentation process was initiated, which was the hospital's careful language for the thing that happens when something that should have been caught wasn't. Willa was in the pharmacy office on the 3rd floor, writing her shift notes when Dr. Prentice appeared in the doorway. He looked at her for a long moment without saying anything. His face had the particular quality of a man who understood that a conversation had ended in a way he hadn't planned for. "The review confirmed the interaction risk," he said. "Yes," Willa said. "You went directly to the patient. After I came to you first." "Yes." Another long silence. "That's not how the escalation process works," he said. "I know," she said. "I documented everything." Willa finished her shift notes. 2 weeks passed. The dosage adjustment worked. Caius Renner's renal function stabilized and then improved. He was discharged on a Thursday morning 11 days after admission, with a modified medication regimen, and a follow-up scheduled for the first week of the month. Willa had not seen him again after that night. She had heard, through the hospital's quiet and efficient rumor network, that he had sent a formal commendation to the pharmacy department, the kind that gets filed, noted, and more or less forgotten, because commendations for residents don't tend to change the architecture of careers unless someone with authority decides they should. She had not thought much about it. She was too busy. She had 4 other charts in reconciliation, a journal article she was trying to finish before her next rotation, and a standing argument with the pharmacy software about an outdated interaction flag that kept generating false positives on a common blood pressure medication. Normal life, the kind that exists in the gaps between the moments that matter. She was at the pharmacy station on a Tuesday afternoon when a message came through the internal system. Not an email, not a voicemail, but a formal written request routed through the hospital's administration office, which was unusual enough that the pharmacy coordinator handed it to her in person with the expression of someone delivering an unexpected package. The request was from Caius Renner's private office. It asked if Miss Okafor-Reid would be available for a meeting the following week at a time of her choosing, at his offices in the Byward Market District. The nature of the meeting was described in careful and formal language as a professional consultation. Willa read it twice. She thought about the 2 men near the window and the door. She thought about the way Renner had held up his hand to still the room. She thought about the fact that he had known, without being told, exactly how far she was into her residency. She wrote back that Thursday afternoon worked. His offices were on the 6th floor of a building that didn't announce itself. No corporate signage on the exterior, no logo in the lobby, just a building number and a security desk with a man who had her name on a list. The elevator opened directly into a reception area that was understated in the way that only very expensive things manage to be understated. Clean lines, good light, the quiet of a place where the insulation is built into the walls. A woman named Ms. Fontaine brought her coffee without asking if she wanted it, which Willa found both efficient and slightly unnerving. Caius Renner was standing when she was shown into his office. He looked significantly better than he had in room 714. The greyness was gone, the posture was fully inhabited again, and he was wearing a dark suit and the expression of a man entirely accustomed to his own environment. Mrs. Okafor-Reid, he said. Thank you for coming. Of course, she said. He gestured to a chair, and she sat, and he sat across from her with his hands resting on the arms of his chair in that same unhurried way. I won't take up more of your time than necessary, he said. I'll be direct with you, because I think you appreciate that more than ceremony. I do, she said. I have a situation, he said. I have a logistics network that operates across 4 provinces, and I have a pharmaceutical supply chain division that was, until 18 months ago, one of the most efficient operations of its kind in the country. In the last year and a half, we've had a pattern of errors in our medication distribution chain. Not dramatic errors, not the kind that make the news, but the kind that accumulate. Small dosage inconsistencies, documentation gaps. A quarterly review that keeps coming back clean even though the operations metrics keep telling me something is wrong. He paused. My current team hasn't found it. 3 external auditors haven't found it. And I am running out of patience. Willa looked at him. You think someone is actively managing the appearance of the audits, she said. I think someone knows exactly where to smooth the numbers to pass a standard review, he said. Yes, and you want someone who knows what a real discrepancy looks like underneath the smooth numbers. I want someone who can look at a creatinine panel at 3 in the morning and know that the dosage is wrong, he said, even when 3 doctors have signed off on it. The room was quiet for a moment. Through the window behind him, the Ottawa River was visible in the middle distance, grey and wide and unhurried. Willa thought about her residency. She thought about the pharmacy software argument and the journal article and the false positive on the blood pressure flag. She thought about the escalation process and what Dr. Prentice's face had looked like in the doorway of the pharmacy office. I'm 14 months into a 2-year residency, she said. I know, he said. An outside consultation would need to be approved by the residency program. I've already spoken to Dr. Achterberg, he said. She's prepared to support a supervised external placement if you're willing. Willa was quiet for a moment. What exactly does the consultation involve, she said. Access to our full pharmaceutical distribution records for the past 18 months, the ability to request documentation directly from the division heads, a dedicated workspace in this building. He paused. And the understanding that whatever you find, you report to me directly, and no one else in the company, until we've established who is responsible and how to proceed. That's a significant amount of access for a residency student, she said. It's a significant amount of trust, he said. I'm aware of that. I'm offering it deliberately. She looked at him. He looked back at her with the same focused, assessing attention she had noticed in room 714, the attention of someone who evaluated people quickly and accurately, and had learned not to second-guess the evaluation. Why me? She said, specifically. He considered the question as if it deserved a real answer, not a flattering one. Because you walked into a hospital room at 3 in the morning to tell a stranger that the doctors were wrong, he said, knowing that your name was going on the paperwork and your residency was on the line. That's not something that gets taught. Either you have it or you don't. Willa looked at the window. The river was still grey, still wide, still unhurried. She thought about the fact that she had almost not gone to room 714 that night, that she had stood in the stairwell with the report in her hands, and thought about documentation and process and the formal hierarchy of the building, that she had made a choice that wasn't the comfortable one or the easy one, and that a man with the morning lab still fresh in her memory was sitting across from her right now because of it. I'll need full access to the dispensing records going back 24 months, she said. Not 18, 24. Something shifted in Renner's expression, not warmth again, that same recognition. Done, he said. And if I find what I think you think is there, she said, we involve law enforcement from the moment we have sufficient evidence, not after. From the moment, agreed, he said. And my name doesn't go on anything internal until that point, she said. If someone is managing the audits, I'm not useful to you as a known quantity. He studied her for a moment. You've thought about this, he said. You told me you were going to be direct, she said. I'm returning the favor. For the first time since she had met him, Caius Renner smiled. Not the faint half-smile from room 714, but a real one. Brief, dry, the kind that seemed to acknowledge something specific rather than express something general. "Mrs. Fontaine will get you the access credentials," he said. "Can you start Monday?" "I can start Monday," she said. What she found over the following 6 weeks was not dramatic in the way that things are dramatic in stories. It was quiet and specific, and required a kind of attention that most people find exhausting. The kind that means looking at the same row of numbers 17 times until the 17th time you see the thing that was always there. The gap was in the secondary documentation. The primary records, the ones that the auditors reviewed, were clean, but the secondary logs, the dispensing confirmations that existed as a backup trail and were not typically included in a standard external review, showed a pattern of substitutions, small ones, consistent ones, the kind that, at volume over 18 months, added up to a significant financial diversion and a non-trivial risk of incorrect medication reaching end distribution points. The person responsible was a division manager named Gerald Ostro, who had been with the company for 11 years and whose quarterly reviews were, without exception, excellent. Willa compiled the full documentation on a Friday afternoon, organized it by date and transaction type, cross-referenced the dispensing confirmations against the primary records, and wrote a clear summary of the methodology she had used to find it. Then she called Miss Fontaine and asked for a meeting with Mr. Renner. He read the summary without speaking, with the same focused attention he brought to everything, and when he finished, he sat with it for a moment. "You said law enforcement from the moment you had sufficient evidence," he said. "Yes," she said. "This is sufficient," he said. "I think so," she said. He nodded once and reached for his phone and made the call. Gerald Ostro was arrested on a Monday morning 11 days later in the Renner Logistics building on Albert Street. The RCMP was involved, which made it federal rather than provincial, which meant it was handled with the deliberate and thorough care of people who don't like having to do something twice. Willa was not in the building when it happened. She was at St. Brendan's, finishing her morning reconciliation reports when Ms. Fontaine sent a brief message through the encrypted channel they had used throughout the 6 weeks. "It's done." She read it at the pharmacy station, between a creatinine panel and an interaction flag on a diuretic, and then she set her phone face down on the desk and went back to work. Her residency supervisor, a quiet, precise woman named Dr. Gagnon, called her into her office 2 weeks later. "I received a letter," Dr. Gagnon said, "from Caius Renner's office. Formally on paper." She paused. "He's offered to fund a pharmaceutical safety fellowship in the department's name. 3 years. It would be the first of its kind attached to this residency program." Willa looked at her. "That's quite significant," Willa said. "It is," Dr. Gagnon said. He was also specific about the naming. He wants it called the Okafor-Reid Fellowship. She looked at Willa over her glasses. He said it was the most accurate name he could think of. The window in Dr. Gagnon's office looked out over the hospital's east parking structure, which was not a particularly inspiring view. Willa looked at it anyway for a moment. "There's a condition," Dr. Gagnon said. "What condition?" "He's asked if you'd be willing to serve as a guest advisor to the Fellowship Selection Committee when your residency is complete." Dr. Gagnon paused. He said, and I am quoting directly here, "She already knows what to look for." Willa was quiet for a moment. She thought about the overnight shift and the stairwell, and the decision she had made between the 6th and 7th floors of this building, in the particular silence of 3 in the morning, with a printed report in her hands and no formal authority whatsoever. She thought about the fact that she had almost chosen the comfortable option. "Tell him yes," she said.